Hello everyone, I'm George from Ireland. I'm at Castello Sforza in Milan. This castle just a little bit south of the city centre. And there you can see an equestrian statue of King Umberto I. It's a sort of relief sculpture, perhaps I should say. He's got this most impressive handlebar moustache, you know, like that, going down on either side, which would make him very popular in a San Francisco gay bar. Perhaps he was a bear, not that that's disparaging. He was straight so far as I know. Above there's some bishop, I don't know who this is. So not going to be disparaging about Umberto I, but it's how things change. You see the portraits, clean-shaven ages, bearded ages, what was popular, what was not. The sound you're hearing is the fountain near me. So the castle behind me, and I'm turning around a bit, it has its origins back in 1358, was Castello Porta Giovia, as in the castle of Jove Gate. So the city had a city wall, of course, because you didn't want marauders to come in and steal everything. It's quite a major trade centre, market town, city, obviously had a cathedral, because it's this plain in northern Italy, and obviously we're slightly to the west of centre within northern Italy. So a lot of flat and very fertile land, superb for farming. Milan is so important, I suppose that's part of the reason that we've actually bothered to have different names for different languages, like Milan as opposed to Milano, or Mailand auf Deutsch. Anyway, so they had different gates of the city, and one of them was a port of Jove. I'm not sure why it was named after that Roman god as in Jupiter, but we sometimes say, by Jove, you're very pucker. People would have said that in the old days. Over here you can see the flags of the European Union and of Italy and of the city of Milan. Italy wasn't united at the time, of course. Through the late Middle Ages, right up into the mid-19th century, it was 24 states, some of them totally independent, some of them semi-independent. Italy was Milan was dominated by the Visconti family for a while, and later by the Sforza family. So that's why the castle is called the Sforza Castle, as in named after them. So it was expanded, built in many different phases, sometimes demolished and rebuilt. By the late 19th century, this tower had largely fallen in. The place was quite decrepit. So Umberto I died in 1901 and decided to rebuild it. It took 4 years to do, partly in honour of him, a spontaneous gesture on the part of the Milanese. Okay, so we'll go into the castle, and it's a huge complex. It houses a number of galleries and museums, an Egyptological museum, and so on. And you can see the castle moat. If we go over to the side, you'll see how deep it was. So the city, by the 16th century, had 2 rings of walls. Although they came together here, it had many gates, too many really. I would have thought that made it a little bit too vulnerable. But there was so much traffic coming in and out. You see how the moat obviously would have been much deeper long ago. Every time it rains, that would have washed a little bit of mud in there. And they would have obviously bothered to maintain it and keep it a little bit deeper. So it would be a bit muddy, a bit wet much of the year, and then refuse to, no doubt, excrement thrown in there. This map, this sort of pictorial map, is a good illustration of it. So that's Castello Sforza where we are, and maybe you can work out the 2 rings of walls, concentric rings of walls, and the many gates in it. So you can go around, but people are supposed to wear masks, but quite a few people aren't. Obviously, I'm keeping away from people. So you can only do sort of an exterior tour of the fort, of the castle. You can't actually go in. All the museums and so on are closed. And then there's a plaque here, up here to Umberto I. To honour his memory, it says. What else does it say? Yeah, okay, the citizens of Milan, they spontaneously contributed for the reconstruction of this tower on the original foundations. Yeah. Okay, so let's keep going. Anyway, as you're going to see, it is gargantuan in scale, and it was very well maintained. It's got some ancient Roman ruins. You see a bit of the pillars up there. And then we've got some cobblestone here. Obviously that's for horses, because in the old days that was the way to go around, and the modern surfaces tarmac out and they tend to slip up because there's not enough grip. You need a bit of friction. So the Visconti family, they were lords of Milan, and later the Sforza family and so on. Some of them rose high in the church. So the church was as corrupt as hell, because like any huge organization with a lot of wealth and power, it attracted some people for the wrong reasons, people who cared more about wealth and power. Anyway, so so it was mainly in the mid 15th century. A lot of what we see was built 1450 to 66 when Francesco Sforza was here. There was also Galeazzo Sforza. Another one of his descendants was Il Moro, another Duke of Milan. Another Sforza, Il Moro. Well, Moro means snout in Spanish. I don't know if it's the same in Italian. Moro wasn't actually his name, just sort of a nickname for him. Anyway, what else did I want to point out about this place? So it really did serve a military purpose, as well as being the court of the Dukes of Milan for some time. Leonardo da Vinci spent some time here, and he built this wooden panelled room, and he painted these scenes there of all sorts of trees, particularly mulberry trees. And it became known as, I think, the panelled room from those wooden panels. I'm not sure there was mulberry tree wood that was used for those ones, because Da Vinci, he didn't actually come from Milan, but he came from a bit further south, from a village indeed called Vinci, which is why it's Leonardo da Vinci. But he later moved to France right at the end of his life, which is where he died. Now look how high the walls are. What are all those holes? They're not loopholes for shooting in, are they? Shows what I know. And look how huge that tower is. The tower is round, because if you're going to try and knock down a tower, the best place to do it is at the corner. So there is no corner. It's rounded. You're getting an idea of the size of the place, and a bit of their coat of arms of that Sforza family way up high. So it is gigantic. You know, to go through all the museums and galleries would take a couple of days. But as I say, they're not open right now. I have been here before. And the one thing about that cobblestone there you see that's so good for equines is if you do it properly, it'll last centuries. An ordinary surface like a concrete surface will last decades, if that. Okay, so what else should I point out to you? So yeah, if you go to the 15th century, southern Italy was dominated by the Spanish, northern Italy by the French, and central Italy by the Pope, the Papal States, and it was states plural. There were several of them, sending a cardinal who would be the legate, i.e. the governor of these various states. Bologna would be one, Urbino would be another, and then the Pope himself, obviously in Rome. He really did rule Rome, the whole of Rome, not just the Vatican City today, the Leonine City, as in the west bank of the Tiber. That's was the bit was most associated with the church, but did rule the whole city. Because Pope Leo, I'm not sure, did he build a wall there? That's what's called the Leonine City. Oh, an art school here, okay. And then it's got CM as in Comuna di Milano, the commune, but we really like to say the city, or the city council. And it's got the Sforza family coat of arms and that cross of St. George for Milan. I mean, I don't know if St. George is their patron saint, but he's a Palestinian, really. Now, so what else to tell about this place? So, although it wasn't actually part of France, the Duke of Milan was an ally, you might even say a vassal of the King of France. But at times the Spanish came all the way up here and briefly conquered this place. See, Spain itself was only united in 1492, although it wasn't officially one kingdom until 1700. It was more than one kingdom with the same monarch, a bit like, you know, Ireland, Scotland and England. They were three separate kingdoms, but they all had the same monarch. In Spain, a similar situation pertained. What else was I going to point out? So this has been through the wars. It was besieged, it was taken over, bits of it were demolished and rebuilt and things like that. Napoleon came here, he knocked down a bit of the wall, he wanted to remodel Milan. Remember, he came from Corsica, so Corsu, a dialect of Italian, was his first language, so he felt very at home here. You know, he'd conquered northern Italy. He had a lot of it was welcomed by some Italians, and so was perhaps more Italian than French. You know, he never mastered Italian. Not mastered French grammar. And so Italian units of the French army, they'd often call them the Emperor's cousins, as in the Emperor Napoleon. Anyway, so it was that Galeazzo II. That Visconti, as in that Lord of Milan, he's the one who had this built, and so his son and grandson were the ones who expanded it very briefly. In the mid-15th century, there was the Ambrosian Republic, and that was what was ruling Milan at the time. So it gives you some idea just how wealthy they were and how mighty a city it was, because bear in mind the population was much, much smaller, but this was the linchpin of the defences. And they've got all these panels in various languages, like Chinese and Russian, so giving an idea about the tourists who come here. Obviously there are very few tourists at the moment. But some of this would have been painted. I can see a coat of arms on the wall, which in times would have been painted. Why don't they paint it now? So, as I say, it was in a sorry state, rather dilapidated by the late 19th century. And some people thought it should be demolished because they thought it was shameful that the Spanish army had been stationed here briefly, the French army too. Il Risorgimento, as in the resurgence, the unification of Italy, was only completed in 1861. Even then, they didn't actually have Rome till 1870, because French troops there, by command of Napoleon III, were protecting Rome to appeal to Catholicism. France is the defender of Catholicism, so the Pope could be the secular ruler of Rome, not just a spiritual leader. But they were withdrawn in 1870 fighting the Franco-Prussian War. The French troops, that's pulled out, which the Italian army marched in, fought the Swiss Guard, that's the Pope's army, and defeated them. So really made Rome part of Italy. So there was this anomalous situation where Italy was 99% Catholic, but the Catholic Church did not recognize the Kingdom of Italy. So this Italian state has no right to exist. And so these Italian soldiers, civil servants, politicians, Catholic almost without exception, and yet disobeying the Pope on this issue. So people are capable of doublethink. So I was going to say here, look at this coat of arms above the door there. I wish they'd paint that one. Where was I? So they thought, should they knock it down in the late 19th century, but they didn't, thankfully, because what a splendid gem it is. I mean, I wouldn't say it's beautiful, but it's certainly imposing. The sheer grandeur of it is something to behold. So there are a number of different courtyards. It's maybe not quite as striking as Hampton Court, but it's certainly a lot larger. And it wasn't a royal palace, of course. So the Habsburgs had dominated northern Italy for some time after sort of France declined after the French Revolution. So the Holy Roman Emperor, go far enough back, the Holy Roman Empire included some of these states. Obviously, the Holy Roman Empire had its capital at Vienna most of the time. It really was meant to be a successor to the actual Roman Empire, but as Voltaire cuttingly said, it was neither holy nor Roman nor an emperor, nor an empire. Because some of it the Habsburgs directly controlled, others indirectly, others just not, only in theory. Ooh, and speaking of Habsburgs, here's one of them who visited and indeed stayed in the castle. Joseph II, who ruled from 1780 to 1790. You see his sash in the Austrian colours. So he's a bit of a patron of Mozart. So his mother was Maria Theresa, as in the only woman to ever be Holy Roman Empress, as in her own right. She was elected to it. She just wasn't empress and wife of the emperor, because it was an elected position, Holy Roman Emperor, but elected by 7 men. And these men, they had the title Elector, as in some cases like the Elector of Hanover, but like the Archbishop of Frankfurt and a few others, the mightiest 7 men. So the Habsburgs, they got a hold of it and held it for about 400 years, that title, even though it wasn't hereditary. But they made sure they got their man elected by a judicious combination of threats and bribery. So in theory it was open to anyone. Henry VIII even thought that he'd get it. A bit unlikely. But come back to so when this guy's grandfather had no surviving son, he wanted his daughter Maria Theresa to take over. Could that happen? That led to the War of Austrian Succession in 1740 to 48, if I got that right. And that's when the Jacobite Rising occurred. So various European countries on various sides of that issue. The pragmatic sanction, as we won't stick strictly to the principle that only a male can inherit, will allow a woman to take over. Sorry, not inherit, get elected. Eventually they got their way. Maria Theresa was elected. So coins were struck in her name, and these ones that minted the Maria Theresa coins, they were used for centuries. Like so for example, Abyssinia accepted them in the 1860s when the British invaded. It was useful for the British and Indian army to know, because they could pay for supplies along the way in Maria Theresa coins. Her husband was at Lothringen, as in from Lorraine, but in German Lothringen, and that's why the Habsburg surname then changed to Habsburg-Lothringen because of that. And so his father was Francis of Lorraine. Anyway, so that's enough about the Habsburgs. So we're going to the ducal court. So the Duke of Milan actually held court here, a bit like a king's court, but a bit down from that. And there's a delightful public park near here. I'm so glad it survived the war with some bombing. So Milan was a real a hotbed of political radicalism right after the First World War. Oh, look at the old cannonballs. Yeah, so we're not that far from the front when they're fighting against Austria-Hungary in the First World War, then there were some people were completely disillusioned with the war, thought it was fought for the rich. Italy suffered very heavily in the First World War, about 600,000 dead in only 3 years, and that's a lot bearing in mind that their population was smaller than the United Kingdom, which suffered 800,000 deaths in 4 years. Sorry, the Italians only were fighting for 3 years. And so some people became communists, seized factories, hoisted the red flag. Inspired by the Russian Revolution, there were fascists fighting against them, and there were maybe more mainstream people like conservatives and liberals, but they didn't seem to have anything to offer. They didn't have such mass appeal. They weren't so emotively attractive. But anyway, the fascists were prominent here. Although there was obviously, with every action, there's an equal opposite reaction. And it was in fascist hands till almost the end of the Second World War, even though it was quite a stronghold for socialism and communism from 1943 onwards, but they had to kind of keep their heads down, be a little bit discreet, otherwise they'd be killed by Mussolini's men. Anyway, so look at this, there's nothing on the ceiling here. So there's an art gallery here and the Egyptological gallery. Look up there, a little reflecting pond. So, and this bit was the ducal court. You can see it's decidedly less military and prettier. Egyptians were going not Egyptians, Italians were going to Egypt in the early 19th century. I can't remember the name of the bloke. He was Italian, was a circus strongman, was incredibly tall, and then got involved in archaeology. There was a documentary, sort of docudrama about him in about 2002. Look at this reflecting pond. Nice, hey? Soothing. There's something looking out onto the water that makes me feel so placid. Anyway, so they brought back a lot of these artifacts from Egypt, obviously as part of the Ottoman Empire at the time, although it had a great deal of autonomy. And the Ottoman authorities, or the Khedive, like the king ruling it then, didn't really care. They were Muslims who had no time for this idolatry for these pagan artifacts. Say, yeah, take the old junk. You want these stones? We don't value them. Or sometimes selling them. So a lot of it ended up here. So it's not just France and the United Kingdom, but principally those two countries, of course, because Napoleon had led his expedition to Italy in 1798. If he'd come to Ireland that year, world history might have been very different. But Napoleon had this harebrained idea that somehow that he would cut off British communications with India. When Britain sailed around the Cape of Good Hope to India in those days, didn't go through Egypt, the Suez Canal hadn't been built, or that he would attack over land to Egypt, as in fight all his way through what's now, say, Israel, Palestine, Jordan, Iraq, Iran, Pakistan into India. Well, that wasn't going to happen, crossing all those deserts and all those mountain ranges. So here we are. And it used to be a lot more murals. And I'm looking up at these things here, where various families have been here. The Sforza coat of arms, the Fleur de Lis of France. I'm very glad they didn't vandalize it. Might have been faintly embarrassed, and so on. So anyway, I talked about Italy being united in 1861 and then getting Rome in 1870. And there was, should they get Corsica, well, they did briefly in the Second World War. Look at the elephant. Wow, was an elephant really brought here? I wonder if there were a lot more murals a long time ago. And then they show you an example. Oh, the portico of the elephant. It's called a portico as in this, well, not quite courtyard, but with the pillars and the roof. This outside area, but still covered. So what is this ecclesiastical scene? See all the clergy? The bishop at his mitre, as in that's the hat, meant to be redolent of flames that burnt out of the heads of the 12 apostles at Pentecost. When Jesus reappeared to them some days after, 50 days after, this was Pentecost, 50 days after his ascension into the ether. Okay, so maybe that's just about enough. I could do a complete circumambulation of the exterior of the castle, but I don't think I'll bother because I don't know that much enough to say about it when I get out there. So Milan, well, highly recommended, and I'm very lucky with the weather. It's not too hot at least, and obviously virtually no tourists. But having said that, you can't actually go inside things because they want to do a little bit of the old social distancing. You can get guided tours in this the castle in various languages, so the exhibition's a little bit interactive. They try and make it child friendly and things like that. Obviously come outside high season, that's the thing to do, so it's not too popular. Another thing in Italy is obviously there's Ferragosto, as in August festival, but from the 15th of August onwards, because 15th is the Ascension of the Blessed Virgin Mary, so it's tutto è chiuso per feria, so don't expect anything to happen on the 15th of August or a few days afterwards. But it's just the worst time to travel anywhere, or be anywhere, because things are booked out months in advance. You know, if you can get a hotel room, it'll be twice the price. There'll be long queues for everything, so I always say August is a month not to travel. Okay, so that's probably enough from Castello Sforza, and that is just showing you a little bit of, see, the Commune of Milan, that coat of arms, that flag. Yeah, this is showing you just a little bit of it, and just from the outside. Okay, so this is Porto del Barco, as in of the boat, but I wonder if there was a little river near here, and it leads onto a splendid park, and then an arch dating from the Roman era with a quadriga, as in a chariot drawn by 4 horses. I'll turn around in a moment, you'll see it in the distance. And some resistance fighters in the Second World War were executed quite close to here. I remember seeing the plaque. There you can see the Roman arch right behind me. Well, that is just enough from Castello Sforza, so highly recommended. Cadorna is the closest metro station, and then you see above the gate the shield with the coat of arms, the Sforza family, and the Milan symbol. Okay, that's enough from me, so please follow my YouTube channel. Bye.